On May 29th, Memorial Day, they tried to erase my father, Paul Brown Jr., VA veteran, Purple Heart, without honor by the Cincinnati, Ohio Police Department, the Spring Grove Funeral Home, and his landlord. And the reason why I say this, on May the 29th, my aunt, Viola Brown, she called the police department to check on my father, to do a well check on him. So normally when we check on our father, we'll call the police department. They'll call us back to let us know how he's doing. But this particular day was one of the worst days of my life. When the police called my aunt back, he stated that they found my father's body in the house dead, and they had already taken his body to the funeral home, a funeral home for a cremation without our consent. I was devastated.
They assumed nobody wasn't coming because the investigator would never said I was told there wasn't going to be a funeral. What would make an investigator say that? Well, he had not talked to the family. Might be different if he knew nothing about a family, but when the family on the incident report, they start in the incident report, they make it, well, you already know we exist. So why would you send the body where they cremate him at? Why would you take him out the jurisdiction? You got no reason to do that.
I quickly notified the director over the funeral home. He told me that he couldn't understand that the police would tell him that it was no next of kin. But looking at the police report, it had my Aunt Viola's name on it. I told him me and my family was coming up to Cincinnati, Ohio to see my father, to view his body. On the way coming up on that Wednesday to Cincinnati, Ohio, I got a call from the director from the funeral home telling us that we couldn't see our father. And I couldn't understand that. We was hurt. He said that a lady called in stating that she was the wife and we couldn't see him. I told him that my father wasn't married and we wanted to see our father. So he told us that we had to wait until Friday. So we still drove up to Cincinnati, Ohio, 12 hours, sleeping in our car, trying to get a room just to be close to our father. It's so many different funeral homes in Cincinnati, Springfield, Spring Grove Funeral Home. They have so many locations. But when I called to speak with the director, the only thing I had was the phone number. And I told him I was coming up. When he called me that night and he said, "I'm sorry, you cannot see your father," we didn't even know where his body was. Thursday morning, the director called us back and I told him that we was going to the police department. He said he would meet us over there.
My sister talks to the detective. He called the officer that had been in the apartment. The officer called the landlord. The landlord tell us he never lived in the apartment. He ain't on the lease. We can't come to the apartment. So now the light bulb goes off. Why am I being barred from my own father's apartment?
So on Friday evening, I got the call from the director telling me he apologized, that a lady called in and she was lying about she was married to him. So he finally texted us the address.
Get in the funeral home. We're looking at the body. My sister said, he been beaten. Left side of his face swole. His nose, there's a little bridge in his nose. Said, okay, we go through that. Me, my uncle, my sisters, my brothers. I videoed it when we was in the funeral home. I videoed the body because I don't want no mistakes of saying it didn't happen. Paul Brown Jr. Every day.
I asked the director from the funeral home, why is my father dressed in a hospital gown? He looked at me and stated that 2 members from his funeral home went and got my father's body, put him in the back of the van, and they washed him up to look presentable. And they put him in a hospital gown. And I'm like, why would they dress him in a hospital gown? He haven't been seen at the hospital, so why would they put him in a hospital gown to make him look hospice? And I found out later that if you're dressed in a hospital gown and you hospice, no autopsy is required. I asked the director of the funeral home, I want an autopsy done for my father. And he said no, because it's medical. And I said, this is not medical. How could this be medical when my father is beaten in the face? He said that the police in the coroner said that an autopsy wouldn't be done because he died of a medical reason. And I said, what's the medical reason? He said he didn't know.
They got 2 scenes on the incident report. They found them 2 different ways. You can't find a body but one way when you come on a scene. When you come on that scene, you're supposed to take a picture how you find that body when you come in that apartment. You being an officer or a sergeant or whoever you are, you know when you first come on that crime scene, when you got to take notes so you will know. You cannot tamper with the evidence. You said you came in the door, you had to force the door in because you couldn't hear him. Now, if you forced the door in, how could the guitar and the piece of the door that you broke off be under his feet if he already did? If he already did, he can't even move. So your incident report don't even match up with what you saying. Now, according to their law, they say if anything is suspicious, an autopsy is automatic.
I'm retired from law enforcement. My brother, he's retired from law enforcement. My sister is in law enforcement. I went to the coroner's department and I spoke with investigator Weber. And I said, how could you release my father's body and move him to the funeral home for cremation without our consent? And he looked at me and my family and he said, I washed my hands of it. I was told it wasn't going to be a funeral. And he gave me the disc. And to my surprise, me and my family looking at the disc, it showed my father's body beaten on the floor with his fist balled up, his pants down, and his penis cut. So how could this be medical? And gonna tell us he don't live there. And later I find the pictures of them standing over my father's body with his license showing he lived there over 10 years. That wasn't the first call they received to check on my father.
Right now, the situation they put us in, we spent everything we had. We didn't have much when we came. Then they caused us to stay on the streets for a whole week. They barred us from the apartment. Then they took everything out of his apartment. And now, we ain't assuming this. When we took the pictures from the corner, they got the pictures of the stuff in the apartment. When me and my sister go in the apartment, the stuff gone. The guitar that's in the scene ain't in the scene no more. The amplifier ain't in the scene no more. So, all we want is justice. All we want is what the average individual would want. Especially on Memorial Day when you disgrace a soldier that done gave his time. The Agent Orange and all that he done been involved in, he did that for his country. When he got back, he was doing things out of the ordinary. Why? Because he done been traumatized in the wartime. Now all of a sudden he crazy because he too old to defend himself. You talking about his asthma pump, he had that for years. That ain't nothing new. He was a fisherman, he was a singer, he was a cook, he was a drawer, he was an artist.
At this present time, my father's body is still at the morgue, at the funeral home, because they refused to give us an autopsy. I spoke with the director on last week, and I asked him about the clothes that my father had died in. He said they threw the clothes away. So not only do they do not want to do the autopsy, all the evidence that we have, they erased it along with my father. How could a man be found dead in the apartment with his fist balled up and his face beaten, and you close the investigation the same day, and an officer sign off on his own investigation? I contact the general. I contact the mayor of Cincinnati. When I spoke with them briefly, the secretary from the mayor's office called me back, and she stated that she spoke with the coroner's office, and they say they don't have anything to do with it because Corrine Police Department has taken my father's body. And I'm like, what are you talking about? They're taking his body. His body's supposed to be to the funeral home. So then she told me she cannot have anything to do with it because she's in Cincinnati and Corrine Township is over it. And I'm like, how could that be when my father's body was in Cincinnati? So I'm confused. How could they take his body out of the district? The police changed my father's address from Cincinnati to Corrine Township. To know his body is still at Spring Grove Funeral Home, and he's not down here to Baltimore, South Carolina with me and my family. We can't bury him. And whoever took his life, and they're getting away with it, and they're using the system to cover up their murder. How could people, the police department, all these people in high places, use the system to do their dirt?
Something ain't right about the situation. I don't know what it is. I'm not guessing. I'm saying let's do the autopsy and give my father the honor that he deserved.
So if you didn't do nothing wrong, why you won't do an autopsy? And if it's medical, why you won't sign the death certificate? How is the situation no autopsy, no death certificate? A coroner won't sign it. A doctor won't sign up on it. I've never heard of nothing like this.
Something that should have been easy to go through so we can grieve and get on over it, you made it impossible.
So I'm reaching out, me and my family, to the world, anybody that could stand with me and my family for justice. We don't have an attorney at this time. Even when we contact the attorneys in Cincinnati, Ohio, they refuse to take it.
To have an unjust go like this here would be a tragedy. Whomever this touch or feel that it could have happened to your family, you know, it take a village to handle things. And if you can help us, we cry that somebody stand for justice. Because if you don't stand for justice, you'll fall for anything. That's it.